been it has been and it will continue to be our cry for the government. I think I'll say the government, Ministry of Health, to come out and say, can we have the councillors integrated into public service? Why? Because the role of the councillor is very critical when it comes to mental health. So like when they say a child has been given, you first take the food you're given, integrate mental health, yes, very good. Now we go and say, let's enjoy this food, but we are coming back to what? To ask for more. We're saying now we follow through to see that public service integrates the councillors in the public service structure, because that will be leaps and bounds for the association, but also for mental health in Uganda. So the councillors, I'd started off by taking you through the cadres that we have, and by default, the cadres that we have then play different roles. I mentioned that we have the cadre, that's the para-councillors, and then affiliate members, people who have attained basic training in counseling, are able to provide help. They'll be able to listen, provide a listening ear, support someone to talk through the issue that they're facing. And where do we find these people? That might be a very key question. Now, because we don't have it fully into the public service structure, you may not go to a health facility and automatically find, for example, at a health center 3 or so. It may not be there. But I know we have some organizations that have provided counselors there in some of the facilities. But I'm going to take you right up to our community structure. We have the family. We have volunteers within the community. If you know of Mothers Union, within the community, we have the local councils in the community. And VHTs, community health workers, who have received basic training in counseling skills. And these people are normally the first contact with this individual back at home, and even the church leaders, or not forget the church leaders. So most of these, I must attest to that because I have engaged with the communities, and I know they have some basic training. They can have a conversation with an individual and be able to support them to listen through. They might not be able to provide high level or specialized care at that level, but at least they'll be able to link this person to say, go to this facility or go to this regional referral, and you'll be able to get help. So we have that basic level at home and in the community. We have people trained. Now we have the counselors. Counselors have attained, say, a diploma in counseling, a bachelor's in counseling. Some of these you can find them in the facilities. And this person has a fair level of training that can make some basic assessment, do a holistic assessment, listen to somebody, and be able to have very good knowledge of the referral system and support this person until they are taken care of by the appropriate service provider. So that is at the counselor level. Now we have the psychologists, and these ones are able to do more specialized care. They can be able to do comprehensive assessments, be able to offer different forms of psychotherapy for the clients, and would find that these can be found actually in some of them. You'll find them linked to regional referrals in private practice. As the association, we have private practitioners who run their own farms and they offer counseling. So I would emphasize that it is very helpful for anyone who wants to source help from a private practitioner. We normally issue licenses. So the person must be a licensed practitioner and a license obtained from Uganda Counseling Association. And that's what would hold us as an association accountable for the service that this person is offering. So in terms of our structure, that is how the different cadres do operate. And basically or generally, the role of a counselor is to help someone to listen out to what someone is going through, make an assessment. We know that some people end up in mental health, okay, may end up being defined as mentally ill, and yet supporting them to talk through might not get them, it can help them alleviate or not reach that state. And I'm sure, Dr. Hafsa, we will not have an overload in Butavika like we are having. We would have some of these conditions managed at the initial stages before they get into mental illness. Yeah, but I know also the counselors work hand in hand with the psychiatrists, to the clinical psychologists, even as they offer care, to be able to follow up and integrate psychotherapy with the medication and treatment that someone is going through. But I think we need to advocate at all our levels that this actually should start within the home or in our communities. And if everyone was keen at that point to do that, to be able to understand what it is, sensitize another person, be on the lookout to arrest these situations beforehand. I'm sure what the scientists are predicting, that so many years from now, it's going to be worse. We will not get there if we started. It's not too late. I'm sure it's not too late, that if we started now, we will be able to alleviate that they seem to be promising will happen. Thank you very much, Emmanuel, and I'm hopeful that a lot of that has been addressed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Elizabeth Okero, the President of Uganda Counseling Association. Those who are joining us on Zoom, on YouTube, we are discussing psychological support, mental health, and home care. And with us, we have had presentations from Marie Nanyanzi, who is the Senior Program Officer, Twaweza. We've had remarks from Dr. Hafsa Rukwata, who is an Assistant Commissioner in the Ministry of Health. We've heard from Professor Wilson Winston Muwezi, who is an Associate Professor, Behavioral Sciences. We expected to be joined by Dr. Jane Irene Nabakoza, who is a pediatrician and public health specialist. I don't know whether she's already online. If she's not, we are glad to have Vincent Mujuni, who is from Strong Minds. And indeed, we have to be with strong minds as we go through this pandemic, as we go through the 42 days of the lockdown. I can tell you already I am getting people who are asking me for help personally because they cannot push with their families. And when people see you, think you have something, but at times we find ourselves in the same situation. Yeah, so we have questions. We have over 70 people who are logged in on Zoom, and they have shared some of their questions. I would like to appreciate Strong Minds for having been available during this pandemic to give counseling, free counseling services. And there is a system you can go through your phone by typing *252*10#. You'll be able to get assistance depending on what challenge you have. So Strong Minds, you'll share with us what has been your experience, what is the volume of people who are seeking for counseling, and what advice do you give to people who have patients who are doing home-based care? Because the ministry, in the middle of this, I think the first wave, we allowed home-based care. This meant that if I tested positive and I was asymptomatic or mild, I could be managed home. And there also has been a challenge of stigma. You have recovered, but people do not want to know that you have recovered. I remember when I had just come from hospital and done and tested negative, even people who knew, because personally I publicly declared that I had contracted COVID. But you would see someone not comfortable getting close to you. So how do family members who have their relatives undergoing home-based care cope with that situation? How do I cope after treatment? Because we are aware that people are stigmatized. People are segregated at workplaces, among their friends. It takes time, by the way, to be accepted. And this has caused people to keep quiet, even about their symptoms and signs. You might be feeling chest pain, or you might be getting a cough, but you see someone trying as much as possible not to cough. Because if you cough, people might think they will start saying COVID. So how do I accept that this is a disease like any other, and I will get treatment and get healed, like I did? I was in hospital for 10 days. I came out and I'm doing whatever I was doing before. Much as that I realized that the healing process is longer. You will still feel some funny pains in the first months after, but later on you will cope up. And how can people spend their time during the lockdown? We've realized too much use of social media. Is social media good, or it can also contribute towards the imbalance in mental stability? Since it is a source of information, but now it is having a mixture. Credible information, distorted information, fake news. How can I cope? Does doing exercises help? There are questions that have come from Zoom, and I will, after you have made your remarks, I will request Dr. Hafsa and Elizabeth and Professor to also make inputs based on these questions, and I'm going to read them now. To what extent has depression affected families, and who are the main culprits between the males and the females, rural and urban centers? This is coming online. So, Kwaweza, who is doing research, these are some of the issues you need to capture in your next research. How is mental health, mental well-being handled for medical personnel? It seems they are the most affected. Is there a relationship between fear and one's immunity? Is what they have said, mental COVID or psychological COVID, which also is dangerous. Someone says, I know I have COVID before they have even tested. So that is one of the issues. Then there is a comment, mental health and psychosocial support have to be integrated into general care. Another question, what is Ministry of Health doing to strengthen community self-help and social support, given that mental human resources gap at lower levels? Is there a psychosocial support system in place for health workers? So these are some of the questions that are coming from people who are joining us, and we have a number, over 70, that include DHOs. Even Christine Anturo, the Deputy Director, Strong Minds, is there. We have the members of the press. I saw the likes of investigative journalist Irene Abaro. So there are very many people interested in this subject, because in the coming days, we will see more of mental health needs as a result of the impacts of the pandemic. And we are even not certain that it's going to end now. But allow me to welcome Vincent Mujuni from Strong Minds. Later on, in that order, I'll give you an opportunity to respond to these questions. Then we shall have questions from the journalists who are with us here in the room. Thank you. You're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, moderator, for this opportunity, and we thank Twaweza for organizing this space for us to enlighten ourselves, but also the public about the mental health and psychosocial concerns that are coming about as a result of COVID-19. My name is Vincent Mujune. I work for Strong Minds, and Strong Minds particularly has a mandate to improve the mental health of women in Africa, particularly due to the vulnerable nature and the state or positioning of women in the social construct of our culture in Africa. So women are generally more vulnerable to depression in Africa. Our goal as an organization is to treat and improve the lives of women in Africa, and our target is 2 million women by 2025. And our expectation is that by that time, we will have reached that target and reached out to several women out there with the treatment for depression. We are one of the few organizations that pride itself in treating depression to scale. We have concentrated on that using a WHO-approved approach, which is the interpersonal psychotherapy for groups. And it is through that we are able to deliver the care for persons who are depressed and those who are anxious across the country. We have presence in a couple of districts in Uganda, and our big or main ways of providing care are mainly through the in-person care, which we have been doing from the beginning of Strong Minds work in Uganda in 2013, when we would go into a community, mobilize community members, assess them, and then take them through the counseling process. That has been constrained at the moment, and since last year, when we had restrictions on movement and public gatherings. And so, through our innovation and work at Strong Minds, we came up with a solution that is able to counter this time, which is called teletherapy. The moderator has just invited you to dial *252#. The option you need to take is option 10. It's the free counseling option. And once somebody logs on, they are able to be reached within a scope of 72 hours for help. So those are the modes of care that we have. Back to your question, moderator. Having heard all that we have listened to, we've known about what mental health is and the kind of presentations that we see when we are not mentally well. And we've seen the structures and how the care is provided and the different options in terms of who provides what kind of care. At this point, I would like to concentrate on the part of what it is that we provide as guidance to them that are going through these times, which are quite challenging, COVID times, and how would they go about their mental well-being? How would they deal with issues of stigma as you raised them, and a couple of other things that you alluded to. We must appreciate that as far as mental health problems are concerned, a couple of them, quite a number of factors contribute to our being not well mentally. And most of these usually happen or drive or lead us to a point where we wear out our own capacity, our own coping capabilities, our resilience to be able to stand and cope again and pick up ourselves again. And usually when we get to that point, then that triggers negative coping practices or mechanisms that make it even difficult for us to remain stable. And what we have seen from a Strong Minds perspective is that the COVID times are not unique to many of the other distressful times, but they have come out, as Twaweza has mentioned, that they have come out and raised a lot of the key parameters that would be the basis for which one would be triggered to either get depressed or even anxious. We've seen that a lot of people in our society have lost loved ones. And the loss of loved ones, the loss of essential property, there are many people who have been working, and this time has drained them to almost zero. Some have loaned out and sold out all they have just to remain coping. The loss of those things that mean and make value for you always leads you in that state where you are vulnerable. We've seen during these times that there have been numerous life changes that have happened. We knew our routine. We wake up early in the morning, go to work, come back. We knew we would have a time to gather in the evening with the friends. We knew we had time to go and gel with the children in a social club or something like that. All these things have been significantly impacted on by the times of COVID-19 pandemic. And because of these adverse changes in life, there is a possibility that these could begin to work as basic triggers for anyone to become vulnerable or susceptible to having a mental health problem. And our concern in this case is we are not just looking at the case of you and I who are adults, we are looking at the case of what's the case of children, what's the case of the adolescent, what's the case of the illiterate woman somewhere. And we are coming from a sociocultural setup where mental health literacy is not a strong part of us. Actually, the stigma is a strong part of us. But the literacy about mental health stands out as a key gap in our society. Most of us think about health from a physical health perspective and less from a mental health perspective. So what does a mother, what does a person in the community whose options of consideration for health has no mental health in it, translate, digest, and interpret what is going on right now? So part of what we provide or what we are looking at as essential or helpful options is that there has been, and this is something that we should be grateful for, that besides other times when we have had a lot of problems and there is limited publicity about them, but we should be grateful that this time round, the sectors, the Ministry of Health, the government arms, in fact, sometimes the pandemics and epidemics are always business for Ministry of Health. For this one time, Dr. Hafsa can testify that we have a holistic response where most of the people around private sector are interested in the situation of COVID-19. People are volunteering free airtime to educate public about the mental health situation and the pandemic itself, and these are helpful options. But how do we help the person at household level, the person in the community that is dealing with this problem at hand? I think at household level, it is essential that one, in the situation or in the event that some of the symptoms, like the ones Professor has alluded to, if you feel that any of these identify with you, the first step or one of the important steps is to seek care. And the options for care, in this case, the Ministry of Health has provided a helpline. At Strong Minds, we are working in partnership with the Ministry of Health to promote the free counseling option. And this option is available on *252# and you choose option 10. We are currently answering calls in over 7 languages, covering the Karamojo sub-region, covering Acholi sub-region, covering the Western, covering the Central, covering Busoga. So we are trying to balance that, because in the event that you don't understand what you are going through, seeking help is the first thing. But other coping mechanisms that could help us a lot could be the fact that you need to maintain your contact, your social contacts. These are very essential for us in the reason that they help us balance up the equation of fear, for instance, the equation of the connections that we have in the community at the same time. If we have lost loved ones, can we help people to appreciate how to grieve and grieve completely? Because some people, because of the nature of COVID-19 and the safe and dignified barriers that are organized for it, there is a potential that death, grieving is hurried, and some people remain with a lot of unresolved grief, and that in later times becomes a trigger that could lead them to problems. So how do we help people to grieve well? How do we create opportunities for psychoeducation that they can be able to find information about how they are feeling mentally from as many sources as possible, through radio campaigns, the social media. I think for the social media, we are in an infodemia where too much information is out there, confusing information, sometimes appropriate information. And the best position as a person who is at the center of this, if you're a father, if you're a mother, if you're a caretaker, or if you are just a person, a young person living your life, staying on the side of the positives is important in a time like this. When you feed yourself more with the negative, your anxiety will just come up. The fear will be an inevitable thing. But you have to choose which sources of information are going to be the trusted information sources for me to listen to, for me to interpret anything that relates to this pandemic. And I think in all intents and purposes, social media has done a great job, but it has also, in the same breath, also contributed significantly to the fear in the public space. And therefore, there is need for you to make an independent decision on choosing which source will work for you. And when you do that, it might save you the trouble that comes with a lot of alarming news and a lot of what do they call them? The headlines that come and the breaking news. And the breaking news are really not breaking just in the information, but they're also breaking you. So how do you deal with that at an individual level? That's something that we are supposed to do. Exercising is important. Working out is important. Why? Because it's a useful disruption for you from any other routines. And you recall that Elizabeth said, you lose interest in the things that you had pleasure to do. Imagine in a state like that, when you have lost interest in the things you had pleasure doing. At that point, what does one do? It is important that you still maintain a fair balance of, choosing that one thing that you enjoy to do. And make sure you do it whether the pandemic exists or not, in simple ways, in ways that are within the law, so that you can carry on with life, continue with life. Feed well, sleep at the right time and have adequate sleep, because times like this require that you recharge your body. And part of how we do it is by having proper rest. And so that could be one of the ways that could help somebody recover or feel better in a time like this, or cope or strengthen their coping mechanisms. We draw a lot of strength and a lot of value in doing good. If you have something extra, do something good in other people's life. Like you said, Emmanuel, you went out and tried, you had many people telling you how they are failing to cope, how they are failing to manage their own resources. Come in if you have and help somebody. The feeling of helping another will do well for you to boost your psychological well-being. And some of those things will play back in your life. I believe that now that children are home, the screen time that children are spending on the TV could be another driver for them to actually be unstable. How do you manage the time that they are on the screen? How do you balance it with time for them to get physical? Go out and run, go out and play football, or go out and do something that disrupts them from being stationary and only on the screen. Because most of the times when that happens, it begins to trigger all the other aspects that we are talking about in this situation. In terms of the advice, I think the last one that I would still talk about in this case is that in the event that you have a loved one or anyone that you know you got in contact with and is COVID-19 positive, it is only good for you not to cast doubt for yourself, not to feel like you are denying it. It is only good for you to accept that actually, because I got in contact, I could be positive for COVID-19, and that should be your drive to go and test and find out whether you are actually COVID-19.